I'm going to show you how to send REST requests. Let's get started.
Hi everyone, I'm Watrous from VVork. If this is your first time here and you want to learn about automating, programming, and monitoring in VMware environments, you're in the right place. Start now by subscribing and click the bell so that you don't miss a thing.
This is part 3 in a 10-part video series in which we're exploring how to make REST API calls. In this video, I'm going to show you how to send REST requests. In the previous video, we learned about REST clients such as curl and Postman, and we took a few moments to install Postman. Please make certain that you have installed Postman because you'll get a lot more out of this video series if you follow along in Postman rather than just watching the demos. In this video, I'm going to show you how to actually make REST requests. There are numerous REST APIs available that you can use to practice. I'll be showing you several of them in this video. And in an upcoming video, I'm going to show you where you can go to find even more REST APIs. To get started, we're going to use a simple REST API that sends us jokes. To do so, we're going to go into Postman. We're going to specify that we want to get a joke. Remember, this is one of those HTTP methods. We're going to get a joke. This is the URL that we're going to point to where the REST operation resides. We're going to click send, and the REST server is going to respond by sending us a joke, such as the one you see illustrated here. Now, the way to learn to make REST API calls is not just to watch videos, but to actually do it. So make certain you've already installed Postman so that you can follow along in the demonstration that I'm about to provide. So let's go make our first REST API call. And to do so, let's head off to the lab environment. As you can see, I've already downloaded, installed, and logged into Postman. If you haven't already done that, go view the previous video and I'll show you how to do that. So here in Postman, we need a workspace to work in and to organize the REST API calls that we're going to be making. As you can see, I already have several different workspaces, but let's create a new workspace. Since you don't have one, let's create a new workspace by going to Workspaces. We'll click on Create Workspace, and we will provide a name for this workspace. You could also type a description. So this is going to be demos for VVork. So type whatever in summary makes sense for you. And then down below, as you can see, we can specify how visible we want this workspace to be. Do you want this workspace and the REST requests that we create in it to be visible only to you, or perhaps you want to share it with a team of people, or maybe you want to make it private and only people who are invited can go in, or maybe you want to make it available to partners, or maybe you want to make it available to the entire world. For our purposes here, we're going to keep this nice and simple and choose personal. That way we can use Postman for free. So we've specified a name, a description, our visibility, and now all we need to do is click Create Workspace. All right, now I have a workspace and I'm going to use that workspace. If I ever want to change workspaces, I can go back to Workspaces and choose whichever workspace. But for right now, we're in the Demos workspace, and that's the workspace that we're going to use throughout these videos. The next thing that you're going to want to do is to create what's known as a collection. Now, circularly speaking, you don't have to have a collection, but you're going to want one. If you don't create a collection, you will still be able to send REST requests, but you won't be able to save them. So we really do need a collection. So we're going to click on Collections, we're going to click on New, and we're going to specify that it's a collection we want to create. And then we're going to give our collection a name. Now, this collection is going to contain a bunch of different REST requests that are going to get us some jokes. So why don't we call this collection Jokes? And as you can see, there are several different tabs that we can go to here to specify more details about this collection. But for right now, all we need to do is to give this collection a name. So again, we're going to call this one Jokes. If we open up our Jokes collection, right now you can see that it's empty. What we want to do is start creating some REST requests. To create REST requests, you can do so either by clicking on this link here, Or you can go to New and choose which type of request you want to create. We're going to be creating HTTP requests. Let's choose that.
Hey Brian, excuse the interruption, but I wanted to say check out the URL in the YouTube description for all the promotions VMware Learning has.
Now we have a form that we're going to fill out in order to specify what we want this REST request to do. We want this REST request to get a joke. So here in this list we have a standard collection of HTTP methods. The one that we want to use in this particular case is the get method. The next thing that we're going to do is specify the URL that indicates which REST operation we want to perform. Now again, you can call this a URL, you can call it a path, you can call it an endpoint. We're just going to call them URLs. In this first example, the URL that we're going to use is https://official-joke-api.appspot.com. You'll recognize that that's a fully qualified domain name pointing to the server that is running the REST server. We could optionally type the port number explicitly, but since we said HTTPS, that implies port number 443. So to save a little typing, we'll leave that off, and then we are going to type a little bit more. What we've typed so far is the base URL, but we have to add a bit more to this URL to say exactly which operation we want to run. So we're going to type a tiny bit more. We're going to type random-joke, and believe it or not, we've already done everything that we need to in order to make an actual REST API call. To make the REST API call, we can click the send button, and as you can see, we've gotten back a response, but this doesn't look like a joke. That's not funny at all. As I said in a previous video, it's very, very important right from the beginning that you get yourself in the habit of looking at the status code that you receive whenever you send a REST request. This REST request resulted in a 404. Now, you know 404 when we're using a web browser, 404 means we can't find the web page that you're looking for. In the case of a REST request, 404 means that the server doesn't know this URL that you're talking about. It doesn't know this operation. So there's something wrong in this URL. Well, checking my API documentation, I can see that I have intentionally typed this URL slightly incorrectly. It's not supposed to be random-joke. It's supposed to be random_joke. So now that we've corrected the URL, let's send this REST request one more time. And again, because we want to develop right from the beginning, the first thing we're going to do every time we send a REST request is we're going to look at the status code. Now notice this time we got a 200 status code. You know that anything in the 200 series means that the request succeeded. And therefore, now when I go looking at the body of this REST response, that's what we see down below. So up top is our REST request, down below is our REST response, and in the REST response, in the response body, we can see a hilarious joke. So as you can see, we now have, with a few simple steps, sent an actual REST request. Now, these jokes are so funny, you're probably going to want to send this request again and again and again and again. So why don't we save this request? And when we save the request, we're going to specify what collection we want to save it in, and we're going to give it a name. As you can see, by default, the request name is just the URL itself, but that's not a very friendly way to name this request. Let's give it a friendlier name like get one joke. Again, you specify the name of the REST request, you specify which collection you want to save it in. Optionally, you can add a description, and when you're done, you will click save, and you'll, from now on, be able to run that request again by going to this saved request. All right, this is going great. Let's dig down a little bit deeper. As you look at the response, specifically the body once again, you'll notice that there are these different buttons here that we can use to view the the body that we received. Now, by default, you're going to be looking at it in pretty view. You'll notice that there's also a raw view, which in this case here is just plain old text that's not formatted very nicely. But even looking at this plain text here, you might very well notice that this is text that's specifically in JSON format. Now, when pretty is used, you can see this JSON formatted text in a much easier to read fashion. But if you wanted to, you could work with the raw version that you see here. There's also a preview version, which in this specific case is not going to show us anything particularly interesting. The preview button is more useful when the REST response includes something like a HTML page, or perhaps the REST response is sending back a graphics image. In cases like those, the preview view will let you see the content that we received in a more interesting way. And then there's also this visualize button, which we don't even have set up yet. So we'll talk about visualize a little later on. When you're in the pretty view, you can generally just click on pretty and it will show you the response in a meaningful, nicely formatted way. It should automatically detect what format the code is in. If not, you can pick from these popular ones, including JSON, which is what this REST server has returned. All right, let's do another REST request. Now, to do another REST request, again, we could go to New, we could click on HTTP to create a brand new request, but oftentimes the requests that you're creating are going to look very similar. For example, if we want to get 10 jokes, we can create a new request. Again, either create a new request, or I'm going to right-click on our existing request, and I'm going to choose to duplicate it. As you can see, I now have a new request here with a similar name. This one's called Get One Joke Copy. And notice as I open up each of these, there are tabs opening up above here that will allow me to switch back and forth between the different requests. Now, this next request isn't going to just get us one joke, it's going to get us 10 jokes. So let's rename the REST request. So I'll click on the pencil icon. This time we're going to get 10 jokes. And this is no longer going to be a copy, so I'll get rid of the word copy. Now, according to the REST API documentation for this joke server, the way you get multiple jokes, specifically 10 jokes, is you change it from the URL ending in random_joke to random_10. Now again, let's go ahead and save our request. Let's once again send this new request, and you'll notice this time we have gotten back not just one joke, but 10 jokes. But before we look at the jokes, before we look at the REST body at all, make certain that you're looking at the status code. Make certain that you've got a 200 series code here. If it's a 200 series code, then that means we've got a joke, or in this case 10 jokes. On the other hand, if you got a 400 or a 500, this REST body is not going to contain jokes, but rather it's most likely going to contain diagnostic information to help you find out what's going wrong. But this did indeed succeed here. We've got 10 different jokes here, each of which is more hilarious than the one preceding it. Now again, we can look at the jokes that we've received here in pretty view or in raw view. Again, preview view is not particularly interesting in this case because it's not an HTML page. It's not an image, but we'll see interesting previews later on. And later on, we'll definitely show you this visualize view because it is fascinating, the types of things that you can do with it. But we're going to start out with pretty. And we are going to do one more request. So again, I will copy this existing, I should say duplicate this existing request. And this time, we're going to edit the new copy. Again, it's not going to be a copy, so let's get rid of copy. And this time, instead of getting 10 jokes, let's get 20 jokes. The jokes are just flowing here. So let's save this new request. Actually, in order to save the request, we've actually automatically saved the name change. But to actually be able to save something new about it, we have to change something. So let's change the URL to random_20. Notice now the save button is ungrayed. Changing the name immediately saves the name change, but saving any other changes, you click the Save button. If we hit the Send button, we send our REST request, we get back a REST response, and what's the very first thing that you check whenever you get a REST response? You know the answer to that. The first thing we're going to check here is our status code. And you'll notice once again, we're getting a 404. For whatever reason, our REST API server does not know this URL. So how do we know that that's incorrect? Well, we know it's incorrect because we're getting a 404, but without actually sending the request, how do we know what the correct URLs are versus the incorrect URLs? Well, in order to know what URLs to use and which ones are correct and which ones are incorrect, you're going to have to consult the documentation that accompanies your REST API. In a later video, I'm going to show you lots of different ways to locate the REST API documentation. For this particular API, the way I can look up what URLs it provides is to go over to my web browser, open up a tab. In that tab, I'm going to go to the base URL, and when I go there, this is all the documentation. As you can see here, we can say a URL that ends in /random_joke. That's what we did first. Then we did random_10. I just tried to do random_20, which is not a legal URL. That's why we're getting the 404. But notice there's two other URLs for two other endpoints, two other operations. /joke/random does the first thing as /random_joke, and /joke/10 does the same thing as /random_10. But nowhere in here does it say that we can get 20 jokes. That's why our REST request that we just made failed with a 404. Before we move on to our next example REST server, I'd like to show you a little trick here that'll come in handy in this video and a bunch of videos coming up. And that's the fact that I have already saved collections such as this jokes collection, so that if you want to, you can just download the collection. Now ideally, instead of downloading collections, you'll follow along as I go through these demonstrations. You'll do the typing, you'll do the clicking, you'll actually create these REST requests from scratch. But if you'd like to shortcut that, you can download the collections. In order to do so, you're going to need to fire up a web browser. Actually, just before I do, to really drive this point home, let's delete our hard work here. I'm going to go to the More button for our jokes collection, and I'm actually going to delete it. Don't worry, I've already saved this collection. I'm going to show you how to download it so that you could just import that collection. So we're going to delete that jokes collection. Are you sure? Yes, I'm sure. And we're going to go over to our web browser, and in our web browser, I'm going to open up a new tab, and I'm going to go to this URL. This URL, as you can see by reading it, is a URL for my GitLab account. At gitlab.com, my account stores various pieces of software. I have multiple repositories, including this repository contains stuff that you can download for this video series. So let's go to this URL, and you are going to need to sign into your GitLab account. If you don't have a GitLab account, the page that URL will take you to will allow you to create your free GitLab account. So take a few moments, create a GitLab account, log into that GitLab account, go to this URL, and when you go here, you'll notice that there is a folder called YouTube. If you click on the YouTube folder, it contains currently a single folder for this video series. If you click on the Making REST API Calls folder, you'll notice that we have a folder called Collections. That's where I've saved all the saved collections. Later on, we'll talk about what environments are. But let's click on Collections. And in here, what we're going to do is download the jokes collection. To download the jokes collection, you simply need to click on the name of this file. Notice, by the way, these collections are saved as .json files. So we'll click on jokes.postman_collection.json. And you can actually see the JSON formatted version of this lovely collection. And what we want to do is to download this. So I'm going to click on the download button. And then I'm going to specify where I want to save this. I'm going to be doing a multitude of these. So let me create a new folder. In my downloads folder, I'm going to create a new folder called collections. I'm going to go into that folder and I'm going to save this specific collection using the default name by clicking save. All right, so that's how you can download all the different collections so that you can import them. Let's go back to Postman. Again, right now I don't have any collections, but not to worry. I can click on import. I can click on files. We'll select the jokes collection. We'll click open. And as you can see, once again, I have the jokes collection and it contains all the different REST requests that we set up. Later on, I'll show you how you can actually save a collection, but for our purposes right now, I just wanted you to see how you can download the collections that I've already saved and import them into Postman. Again, you'll get the most out of this video series if you do the hard work yourself, but if you'd like to shortcut it a bit, you can download these collections.
Join me in the next video for more example APIs.